What's up, guys? It is exactly 28 days later, and I've managed not to turn into a zombie, so art did not imitate life. Anyways, I've got a hip circle on, and you'll notice it's around my ankles and not around my hips or my knees, and we're going to talk about why your hips and your ankles do not lie. And if you're having issues with knee pain or that anterior pinching feeling within your hip, chances are there's something that's a little bit off, needs to be improved. Maybe it's a mobility issue, maybe it's an over-exaggeration of constantly external rotating, which we do on the squat and the sumo deadlift. And this is for a friend of mine who's a multiply lifter. So he squats wide and sumos wide. So there's a tremendous amount of external rotation, and I'm willing to bet he's probably lacking some internal rotation. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna use this hip circle to actually open up the ankles, because his ankle mobility, since he sits so far back, is probably somewhat compromised as well, especially in that external rotation. So we've all seen the one with the band where you do the banded ankle distraction. That's great, but it's single side. So we wanna have that banded ankle distraction within the squat pattern. So I have the hip circle on. We're gonna move it down towards the tailbone, down here. And we're gonna allow a lot of forward knee travel. So you see that's already pulling back against it. And then from there, I wanna be active, not passive. So if I were to gently push like that and keep this down, that's passive, right? My body can't do that under load because it's a passive movement. I need to actively do it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actively push into each side against that band and work on keeping my foot nice and flat. So I'm actively pushing, and I can do it together and actively push out to get that end range of motion that I want for a flat shoe squat. You don't have to go flat shoes, you can go heels. I'm not here to judge that either. But I want to be as active as possible, because that's what we have to do under load. We have to actively support, we have to actively move, not passive. So while passive movements feel great, they don't help you actually move the weight because they're not active. I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. So we're gonna bring that up. So now we've got the ankles nice and loose and mobile. Now the hip circle's going where it actually belongs, over the hips. We're gonna do a hip airplane, souped up a little bit. So the hip airplane is an internal external rotation where you're balanced on one leg. We're gonna take away the balance component because we're gonna do it resisted. So I'm gonna hold onto the bar in front of me. I'm gonna bring that leg back, and I'm gonna internally rotate into the hip and turn out. In and out. I'm gonna kind of rush through these a little bit because I got a lot to go over. So I'm not gonna do like normally I would do sets of 10 or so. I'm gonna do a couple, and I'll switch sides, switch hands, opposite side. Internally rotate, externally rotate against the resistance. Internal and external. And I get rid of that. So the hip circle's going bye-bye. We've got a band here. And you've seen this a lot to traction that hip, to pull the acetabulum. Where people put the band in here, and again they do this. They passively internally rotate to pull that head of the femur into the acetabulum. We need to be active. So if you can't do this actively against the band, you have a big problem. It's a big indicator. So if you have to passively do it, you're fucked up. Actively do it. Keep that foot nice and flat. Lean forward to a little bit, so it's kind of like the bottom of that squat pattern, and actively internally rotate. See that? Feels actually pretty good. So I'm gonna get rid of this. And then I have a lot of my lifters do this as a warm-up. It's a banded hip internal rotation. So I did a lot of this with Stacy, do a lot of this with Dallas Norris, both all-time world record holders. I'm gonna wrap it around my foot, pull it underneath my ankle, jam that elbow down, and I'm gonna hold it here. So I've locked it in, and I'm gonna internally rotate against that band. So now I'm resisting that internal rotation, and I can add a little bit of a squat pattern to it by pressing up while I'm internally rotating. All right, hopefully you guys are still watching. And now we're gonna test that ankle end range under the bar, see how we're doing, and the hip pattern. That's pretty good range. Knees went out easily, feet stayed flat all the way down, despite the horrendous injury I had 28 days later. So focus on your ankles, focus on your hips, the knees will take care of themselves.